Today, let's trace the incredible journey of a simple idea as it transforms into a project with real-world impact. We so often see the finished product, but how does it actually get from just a thought to a real thing? Let's dive in and see how it's done.
You've probably wondered about this, right? We see these monumental achievements all around us, but how do they even begin? Where does that first spark of an idea come from? And more importantly, how does it survive and grow into something so complex?
Well, it turns out the answer isn't magic. Nope. Behind every successful project, there's a structured, really thoughtful process that's designed to protect that initial spark and guide it from just a promising concept into a successful reality.
So where do we even begin? Well, at the very beginning, of course, the spark. This is the first phase of any project, where a need, a problem, or maybe a game-changing opportunity is first recognized.
Projects don't just appear out of thin air. They're always a response to something specific. It might come from a company's high-level strategy to break into a new market, or it could be a simple operational need, like finally upgrading that old, frustrating system. Sometimes it's a direct response to an unexpected crisis. And hey, a lot of the time, it starts with passionate volunteers who just want to make a difference.
But here's the reality. Organizations always have more ideas than they have resources. So they face this really critical challenge. How do you choose? This is the selection process, that crucial filter where they have to decide which ideas get the green light and which ones, well, have to wait.
To make this decision fairly and, effectively, there's a pretty clear four-step process. First, you've got to develop consistent criteria so you can judge every project by the same standard. No playing favorites. Second, you list your assumptions. What has to be true for this to actually work? Third, you gather the hard data, the financials, the research, what people actually want. And finally, you evaluate everything against your criteria to make the call.
Okay, now take a look at this. This slide really makes that decision-making process tangible. Look at Project B. It has the highest return on investment, over 18%, which is fantastic. But it also needs the biggest investment by far and carries the highest risk. Now compare that to Project A. Much lower investment, low risk, high chance of success, but a much smaller return. This is a perfect illustration of the kind of trade-offs that decision-makers have to weigh. There's rarely a perfect answer. All right, so once a project gets selected, it needs to be made official. And I love this analogy. Think of the next step as creating the project's birth certificate. It's the document that formally brings the project into existence inside an organization.
And that official document? It's called a project charter. Its purpose is basically threefold. 1, it formally authorizes the project. 2, it gives the official approval to get going. And this is the big one. 3, it commits the money needed to get the work done. It's the official starting gun for the race.
So, what's actually in a charter? Well, a good one answers the most critical questions right up front. What are we trying to achieve? That's your objective. How much money do we have to work with? That's the funding. What are we actually going to create or produce? Those are the major deliverables. When are the key deadlines? That's the milestone schedule. And crucially, who is in charge here? That's the project manager.
Okay, but what happens if an organization doesn't have the in-house expertise or, just the staff to get the work done? Well, that's when they need to call in the experts. This is where outsourcing comes in, and it all starts with a document called a request for proposal, or an RFP. So what is an RFP? It's basically a formal invitation. The customer prepares this document to clearly define exactly what they need, their project requirements, and then they send it out to potential contractors, inviting them to submit a proposal that details how they would get the job done.
The best way to think about this is like a structured conversation, a real two-way street. The customer's RFP asks the questions, what do we need and why do we need it? The contractor's proposal then provides the answers, how we'll do it and for how much. It's this formal dialogue that makes sure everyone is perfectly aligned before any work even begins.
So, after all that, what's the big takeaway here? All of these steps, the identification, the selection, the charter, the RFP process, they're really all about one single thing, making sure the project has a strong, solid start. And that brings us to the most crucial point of all. A clear start prevents a chaotic finish. By investing that time and thought up front, defining the need, picking the right project, and formally authorizing it with clear parameters, you are laying a solid foundation. This upfront work is what separates the successful projects from the ones that just spiral into chaos and failure.
Every great achievement you can think of started with this exact process. An idea, a careful evaluation, and a formal beginning. It really isn't magic.
It's a method. So, looking at how it's done, the real question is, what big idea will you bring to life?